So in the second section, we'll explore the unique impacts of the coronavirus pandemic on resilience, our clients and our own. What does resilience look like under these conditions? And do the practices for strengthening resilience change in any significant way? We'll look at the somatic front line of resilience and the importance of returning the nervous system to equilibrium, deepening connections with other people to do that, and cultivating a resilience mindset to strengthen resilience for the long haul. So the coronavirus pandemic and the resultant sheltering in place caused major paradigm shifts in mid-March for everyone. All the rules and all the anchors changed overnight. Just the week before, I was in person at Book Passage at a friend's book launch. I was in person with friends at the Lark Theater. And suddenly, overnight, the dissolving of everything we had planned, new orders, new rules, shut down to cope with new dangerous dangers. In practicing resilience and from the emerging understanding of polyvagal theory, I've learned the importance of regulating the nervous system as the front line of resilience. And in fact, returning to a baseline physiological equilibrium is considered an objective measure of resilience. I've learned to pay attention to the nervous system, mine, my friends and family, clients and colleagues. We all know the first perceptions of danger and life threat come from the autonomic nervous system much faster than conscious processing. Outside of our awareness, the autonomic nervous system is always scanning our inner physiology and the outer environment, especially our people environment, for signs of safety, danger, and life threat. The dangers may vary quite a bit by race or class or gender, but the nervous system itself is biological and universal. At the first perception of danger, real or in memory or imaginary, the nervous system revs up. It's a sympathetic activation, the mobilization that leads to fight or flight, moving toward the danger or moving away from toxicity. We act and react quickly to solve the problem or the danger we are facing. And if that activation doesn't work, or sometimes out of our condition, we don't even try that, the nervous system will deactivate, immobilize, go into parasympathetic paralysis, the dorsal dive in the new polyvagal terminology. We shut down, withdraw, collapse, become immobilized. We can think of the too much revving up as anxiety, too much shutting down as depression, and it would be very common or even natural for clients and us to experience either or both many times a day as part of an overwhelmed nervous system's response to the pandemic. The important thing is to be able to return the nervous system to its natural physiological baseline equilibrium, its homeostasis, its range of resilience. And trauma therapists know that range as the window of tolerance. The sudden overactivation of the nervous system could cause a sudden scramble. And we probably all did some of that this spring, quickly transitioning clients to telehealth. For me, watching all of the in-person teaching schedule for 2020 all over the world dissolve, shifting to teaching online webinars in a matter of weeks. I have my own tendencies toward catastrophic thinking, fueled by this sympathetic, don't just sit there, do something. I grew up with parents who had lived through the Great Depression and World War II. So I caught myself thinking, the grocery stores are going to run out of food. The banks are going to fail. The internet is going to fail. Social Security will fail. And I did all of that in 3 seconds. And I had to reel that back in. All of that scrambling is trying to solve the problem. And I needed to return to my window of tolerance, the brain's base of skillful coping. But I was vulnerable to the other side too, collapsing into the dorsal dive. At the beginning of the pandemic, in a shock, in a daze, not knowing what to do, I needed to reactivate and stay engaged. And this is where the stability and structure of routines was actually helpful to people in the early stages of the pandemic. Eat breakfast, do the dishes, feed the cat, walk the dog, check email, keep moving, stay engaged. So I pushed myself and I pushed my clients to find and come back into that window of tolerance. And because we are regulating the body's signals of safety and danger, we use body-based tools: breath, touch, sound, movement, visualization. You know many of these tools already, and it's in our general culture now. When we experience stress or fear, breathe, because it is slow, deep, gentle breathing that regulates the entire nervous system and brings the nervous system back to calm. I once heard Bessel van der Kolk, who's the pioneering researcher of trauma for 40 years, and the author of The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, say at a conference, if we therapists don't have a body-based trauma therapy in our toolbox, we could be guilty of malpractice. Hand on the heart, or anywhere that feels safe and soothing to the body. Hand on the forehead and on the back of the neck to create a connection between the brain stem and the higher brain center of executive functioning. A tool from Havening, which is a relatively new and powerful somatic-based trauma therapy, gently rubbing the hands together. And that will be in your bibliography. Giving and receiving a hug when it's safe to do that these days, or a virtual hug. I have one client who taught me touchless touch as we meet on Zoom. So I lift up my hand so she can see it on her screen. And then she touches her hand to where I put my hand on the screen, and it's comforting and co-regulating for her. Movement, especially any movement, juxtaposing tension and relaxation, like progressive muscle relaxation, which has been around for 40 years. So you tense a muscle group and you hold it for a count of 7. And then you release and relax those muscles for a count of 15, so that the relaxation is twice as long as the tensing. The counting focuses the mind's attention and keeps the mind from ruminating on the worries of the day. And I found this technique especially helpful when clients are trying to go to sleep at night. Using movement to help clients recover both energy and calm, I teach the power pose that Amy Cuddy developed at Harvard Business School. And I can do this in the room with the client or even online in Zoom. So you stand tall and erect and your feet are planted firmly on the ground, your feet hip width apart. You lift up your spine. You lift up your chest. You lift up your head and you stretch your arms over your head like Tadasana, the mountain pose in yoga. You stay grounded in your feet and hips and torso, but you feel the energy move up your spine, through your arms, and through the crown of your head toward the sky. It's getting the energy moving up the spine. That's the most important part of the pose. Then I have clients practice moving back and forth between a posture of anxiety or worry and the posture of the power pose for about 5 minutes back and forth. Gradually letting go of the posture of worry and remaining in the posture of power and strength and courage. Then I ask them to practice the power pose in the moments before they enter any challenging situation, which these days may be going to the grocery store. They find a quiet, private place where they can let themselves feel the anxiety or worry in their body that they want to shift gently, not to overwhelm. And then they move into the power pose. And then they walk mindfully into that situation with more inner strength and energy. And with frequent practice, the power pose becomes a natural way to tap into your inner strength and courage and resilience. So these would be tools we would be using in response to any dysregulation of the nervous system to cope with any stress or trauma. And I really am pushing these tools with clients during this pandemic to begin regulating the nervous system, recovering the range of resilience, being able to think clearly and respond wisely. And for the COVID-19 pandemic specifically, besides the client's individual nervous systems responding to the signals of danger or life threat specific to them individually, everyone is responding to the collective anxiety, the collective sense of threat and trauma so pervasive these days. At any time, anything new, unfamiliar, unknown, unpredictable will evoke signal anxiety in the nervous system and catalyze us to take steps to learn and understand and make known and figure out what to do. The scale of the unknown and the unpredictability and contradictory information of when this will be over, when will we be safe again? This is safe, this isn't. This was safe yesterday, but not today. That's really pushing the envelope of people's capacity to manage that signal anxiety. It's very similar to the unknowns and the unpredictability of the wildfires that we're currently experiencing that wasn't even part of this topic when we scheduled this webinar. So we're experiencing collective anxiety because no one seems to have the correct answer or an accurate timetable for how long this shutdown will continue. And that can lead to a kind of collective malaise, a collective enduring through passivity. And it's especially hard for parents who are now double sheltering in place with the kids at home, online for school, but not able to meet up with their friends or even run off some energy outside. So one answer to that collective anxiety and collective passivity is to foster, encourage, and require connections with other people. So we all know this too. Human beings are social beings. Human brains are social brains. And we all need the reassurance of safe connection with safe others to co-regulate our own nervous system. We thrive when we experience regular, safe, nourishing, and revitalizing connections with people. And we lean into despair if we experience too much isolation or loneliness. So of course, we try to provide safe connections with our clients ourselves through Zoom or by phone. I do know some therapists who have continued meeting with their clients in person when they have an office large enough and when they have a separate entrance and an exclusive waiting room. Deb Dana, who's a trauma therapist who's very expert in polyvagal theory, has set up her own home office to look almost exactly like her regular office. Same chair, same bookcase, same paintings on the wall, and sitting at a distance from the camera so that it looks like she's sitting with her clients in her real office. There are webinars available to teach therapists how to work most effectively on Zoom. Lisa Ferrance, who's an expert trauma therapist, did a wonderful webinar last April for leading edge seminars in Toronto. It's still available on their website. It's so important to look at the little light of the camera on your computer when you're speaking, so that it looks to your client like you're speaking directly to them. And then to look at the image of the client when they're speaking to pick up the nuances of their facial expressions and body language. And because Lisa had a background in theater before becoming a psychotherapist, she encourages therapists to be bigger on screen than they would need to be if they were still meeting in person face-to-face. More animated, more expressive, more energized and engaged to overcome the flatness of the screen. And I find there's real joy in seeing my client in person, even when it's on the screen, showing up and savoring the continued connection. I do push my clients to stay connected with other people as another level of protection and nurturing during the pandemic. And that will bring up all of the issues clients already have around connection and disconnection, good communication and boundaries, or poor communication and boundaries, issues of trust and shame around relating to others. So there may be an opportunity to do some good therapeutic work around clients' practices to stay in connection with others during shutdown. I encourage clients to be as creative as they can be. Chess games and board games via the internet with cousins and friends, Zoom dinners, Zoom cocktail parties, group bike trips on the weekend, in-person block parties and book clubs with enough physical distancing, creating study pods now that schools are in session online. I gave a eulogy at a Zoom memorial service this summer, which was more intimate and transcendent to be in a community of family and friends than I could have imagined. And this emphasis on connection could lead to an awareness of interconnection. The word pandemic comes from the Greek words for all people. And there's not a place on the planet that isn't touched by this virus. And the need to refocus not just on individual or family health and safety, but on protecting the common good could be one of the silver linings of this terrible plague. So the Belfast, Ireland COVID-19 team sent out a poem early in the pandemic that quickly went viral, so you may have seen it, called Love in Action. When you go out and see the empty streets, empty stadiums, and empty train platforms, don't say to yourself, it looks like the end of the world. What you're seeing is love in action. What you're seeing in that negative space is how much we do care for each other, for our grandparents and our parents, our brothers and sisters, for people we will never meet. People will lose jobs over this. Some people will lose their business, and some will lose their lives. All the more reason to take a moment when you're out on your walk or on your way to the store or just watching the news, to look into the emptiness and marvel at all of that love. Let it fill you and sustain you. It isn't the end of the world. It's the most remarkable act of global solidarity we may ever witness. So besides the somatic tools and this encouragement or requirement of connections that we provide clients to cope with the now double sheltering from the pandemic and the fires, we can vigorously encourage them to use the practices that help them sustain a sense of meaning and joy and even awe at any time. Spending time in nature when that's feasible. Enjoying culture through YouTube videos. Many are available now. Among my favorites at the moment are the free Now More Than Ever playlist from Cal Performances at UC Berkeley, and the free Conversations with Authors sponsored by Book Passage. Spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, and yoga. There are many classes online these days, even fitness classes, that incorporate a sense of community. And one more next step in coping with the pandemic that I lead all of my clients into, which is cultivating a resilience mindset. It's basically the growth mindset of Carol Dweck's research on mindsets when she was at Columbia University. So very briefly. A fixed mindset comes from a system of beliefs that talents, aptitudes, temperaments, personality traits, and preferences are fixed. Either you have the smarts or the good looks or the talents or the traits of resilience, or you don't. And that is so relevant right now as we try to break through our own fixed mindsets about the trait of any client or any group. Dweck doesn't refer to shame in her research, but folks who have been conditioned into a fixed mindset feel an urgency to prove over and over again that they are as good as they believe they are, or more likely that others believe they are, to meet expectations, to succeed, to never fail. So hence, with a fixed mindset, are super sensitive to being judged and are very vulnerable to feeling rejected, a failure, an idiot, a loser, worthless. Nobody loves me, pitiful. And the response to failure or a setback is to fear challenge, to devalue effort, and to avoid risk, to stop trying, to give up, to retreat, withdraw, and veg out. So the fixed mindset robs people of their capacities to cope. A growth mindset comes from a system of beliefs that talents, aptitudes, temperaments, personality traits, and preferences are simply a starting point for development. That would be a healthy mindset to view our clients or anyone in our society from, to view ourselves as we learn more about our own condition, reactions, and behaviors. Oops, messed up. What can I learn? That growth mindset fosters curiosity, resilience, and a passion for learning through effort and perseverance. People with growth mindsets respond especially well when things are not going well. They tend to stretch themselves, confront obstacles, embrace risk, and stick through the hard times. And rather than be embarrassed or blocked by a sense of deficiency, they can acknowledge what skill or capacity is missing and set to work cultivating it. They take direct, wise, and compassionate action. Love of challenge, belief in effort, resilience in the face of setbacks, greatest creativity and success are the hallmarks of the growth mindset. And in Dweck's view, we can intentionally choose to cultivate a growth mindset. That would be characteristic of the growth mindset right there. Our mindsets are not fixed. We can put in the effort to shift our orientation to life events from fixed to growth. We can shift how we filter our perceptions of ourselves and our experiences, how we filter our perceptions of other people and their experiences, and their capacities to change and grow. That means we live our lives not about avoiding failure or distress, but about grabbing a hold of failure or distress as an opportunity to learn, to improve, and to master. As Pat and I were processing our mistake about scheduling this webinar on Rosh Hashanah, we could say, let's just start with, we're all in trouble. We all make mistakes. We all mess up. We all do. What we can try to do is become aware, recognize the mistake, acknowledge the harm, learn from what we did, and practice what we could do differently next time. Make amends and repair and recover our resilience. So choosing to cultivate a growth mindset and master our resilience changes everything. So I will lead my clients and I will lead you in a practice of shifting from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, but the exercise is in my book and it's on my website as a free guided practice. Take a moment to reflect on many different situations where you faced a challenge, or even something simply new or unknown. Reflect on your own thought process and your own behaviors. Discern times when you did hang back, hesitate, or refuse to attempt something you perceived a bit beyond your capacities. Discern times also when you approached a challenge as a learning opportunity with interest, curiosity, and some confidence, at least a willingness to give it a go. Most of us have experienced elements of both fixed and growth mindsets. For one of your times from a growth mindset, reflect on what made your decision to try and your perseverance in trying even possible. How did you choose to be resilient? Identify both internal and external resources. For one of your times being caught in a fixed mindset, imagine how you could have behaved differently, finding your courage and encouragement from others to go ahead and try. Engage, persevere, try again and again until you experience some success or at least a healthy pride in your effort. Identify a new situation now where you could try coming from a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset. Choose a situation where you might reasonably have a chance for success and focus on shifting your mindset from fixed to growth. And reflect on any differences this choice makes on your choice of behavior. What will you do when a setback or adversity happens? And this exercise helps clients move toward a more resilient mindset. And when I'm working with clinicians, I update the research about strengthening resilience. So I want to share this quote from Kelly McGonigal, health psychologist at Stanford University. And Kelly says in her book, The Upside of Stress, Why Stress is Good for You and How to Get Good at It. Resilience is not about being untouched by adversity or unruffled by difficulties. It's about allowing stress to awaken in you these core human strengths of courage, connection, and growth. Whether you are looking at resilience in overworked executives or war-torn communities, people in military deployment, immigrants or refugees, people living in poverty, battling cancer, or raising a child with autism, the same themes emerge. People who are resilient allow themselves to be changed by the experience of adversity. They maintain a basic sense of trust in themselves and a connection to something bigger than themselves. They also find ways to make meaning out of suffering. To be resilient is not to avoid difficulty, but to play an active role in how difficulty transforms you. To play an active role in how difficulty transforms you. That's what we try to lead our clients through. And then another piece of research from the book Resilience, The Science of Mastering Life's Greatest Challenges by Stephen Southwick and Dennis Charney, who are psychiatrists at Yale University. People who are resilient tend to be flexible. Flexible in the way they think about challenges and flexible in the way they react emotionally to stress. They are not wedded to a specific style of coping. Instead, they shift from one coping strategy to another, depending on the circumstances. Many are able to accept what they cannot change, to learn from failure, to use emotions like grief and anger to fuel compassion and courage, and to search for opportunity and meaning in adversity. So even in this pandemic, inviting clients to play an active role in how these difficulties transform them. Framing the challenges of these times as learning from the AFGOs, another frickin' growth opportunity. What am I learning? About resilience and about making choices. Bernard Baruch says the art of living lies less in eliminating our troubles than in growing with them. asking what's happened, what is happening, what are the consequences, what did I do, or what am I doing, what could I have done differently, what will I do differently next time. These are essential questions in bouncing forward to new possibilities, someday to a new normal. So now is the time for another break for discussion, questions of anything I've talked about here, and learning from you, how you help your clients learn the practices that will regulate their nervous system and return to their range of resilience, foster the connections with safe others that will nourish their spirits, and help them learn from the afghos of this pandemic, large or small.